So post-conflict societies, fragile states, conflict-torn societies are often characterized by weak political institutions, a lack of civil society, a need for the reform of the security sector, and obviously an absence of oversight of the security sector. So when we're trying to reestablish peace in a given country, recreating or reestablishing parliamentary oversight of the security sector is one of the important elements in the reconstruction process. So in this kind of an environment, which is usually unstable and fragile, and where minority rights are usually not respected, where the security sector is usually serving the state rather than civil society, the parliament can and has to play a very important role. If it is legitimate and democratically elected, then its role ought to be to channel the voice of the people, the voice of the different minority communities, whether they're linguistic minority communities, religious minority communities, ethnic minority communities, the role of women, the rights of women, to the executive, to the government. So in a way, they provide a forum, a channel between the people and the government. How do they do this? Usually they're organized in committees where they can discuss draft laws, for example. They can request information from the executive on the security sector. Obviously, this is quite problematic in conflict societies in that the security sector is perceived as being surrounded by much secrecy. And this is one of the reasons that the state uses to justify the lack of channeling information to the parliament. But the parliament has a right and ought to ask for this information, to be informed about what kind of reforms the executive is doing. Is it doing the reforms to check how the money is used, to decide on what kind of budget the executive can have for such reasons? As far as channeling the concerns of the population, what's very interesting here is that the parliament can check through the monitoring of the security sector where the human rights are respected. And that's the connection with the citizen. And therefore it can prevent abuse of power. It can prevent arbitrary behavior by the executive, by the government, and it can ensure that the government acts in a legal and constitutional manner. One thing that must be remembered, and that's really important, is that usually in these kind of societies, after a war, after a conflict, and in fragile states, the executive is much stronger than the parliament, which means that really the oversight relies on courageous and proactive parliamentarians who are willing to engage with the government and who are willing to criticize the government.